there's times I've been overwhelmed. There's times I've been, I'd say, stale.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of the reboot. And there's times I've been like, is this all there is? We went through it was a really tough time. So we got pretty far through the adoption process, and very suddenly it was ripped away from us.
We're here today. This is the initial podcast.
Version 1. Episode 1.
Episode 1.
Pilot.
It all starts here, right? This is Reaching for Answers. Name of the show, right?
Awesome.
So
excited.
The road to Emmaus. The road to Emmaus, right? And we are a brotherhood of men that hold 2-day retreats for the purpose of
spreading the news.
Yeah.
Spreading the good news.
Evangelizing.
What is the good news?
Jesus Christ is risen.
He's risen indeed.
Jesus Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Now, I, as a former atheist, when I first heard that when I was on retreat, I went, oh, come on, man. Are you kidding me? I'm going to be spending a weekend with a bunch of Jesus freak guys, and I really don't need it. Okay. So, that's kind of where I was. I was kind of overwhelmed with the good in my life, and I was kind of in that category. Mike, where were you when you first went to your first Emmaus?
I was just uncertain where my life was going. So I was reaching for an answer.
Okay.
What kind of husband should I be? What kind of father do I need to be? What kind of son, brother do I need to be?
Were you doing a bad job of it at the time, or what?
No,
not terrible. I was, if I had to give myself a grade, a B-.
A B-.
I was doing okay. Good father, not great father. Good husband, not great husband. Good son, not great son. So, was this all there was?
Ah, okay.
Right. Did I peak?
A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Is this all there was?
Yeah. And where were you at the time when you first got in? We're going to get deeper in a few minutes, but where were you?
Yeah, I'm very similar. I wanted to be a better father, a better husband, a better follower of Jesus. And, I thought I was there. But I knew there was...
You thought you were there?
I thought I was there.
Your wife didn't think you were there because...
Yeah, right. And I thought I was there. I was going to church. I was praying. I was reading the Bible. I thought I was there. And then I realized I wasn't there.
You weren't there.
There was something missing. There was something that I needed. And that's when I said, I do want to try to find something else. And that's how I ended up going to Emmaus.
So who comes to Emmaus retreats? And, who's ever watching this podcast, all right, what are we really trying to get across to them? What's the point of everything that we're doing? Mike, you have any thoughts on your point of view as to what you think we're trying to accomplish here?
I mean, like you said, we're trying to spread the good news in a way where we're not preachy. We meet people where they're at.
There you go.
So some people are already on fire. They've been to dozens of retreats, and that's cool. And some people, their wife made them go or their mom made them go, and just they're kind of dragged there, and they're looking at their watch. They want to leave in an hour, and that's okay too.
Okay.
Right? So we kind of all are welcome.
Yeah. And when you say, Angela, we say all are welcome. Do you have to be Christian or Catholic? Or in fact, we're not that at all. Or what are we?
Yeah.
Who shows up?
Yeah, it's everybody. Anybody can show up. You don't have to be Catholic. You don't have to be Christian. You could be searching for anything. And we welcome everyone. I think we're just a group that just will welcome anybody who's interested in coming, anybody who needs to be there. We're there for you.
I think that one of the most interesting things is I probably know 500 guys from going to the retreats, maybe over 30 retreats. And I don't know what most of them do for a living. I have no idea.
Doesn't matter.
It does, because for whatever reason, on an Emmaus weekend or Emmaus retreat, you don't care. I mean, it just melts away. So there's all socioeconomic levels, all nationalities, all races, creeds, colors, sexual orientations. It just doesn't matter. All men are welcome.
Absolutely. I've had homeless guys at my table, and I've had wealthy guys at my table.
And not even knowing which one's which.
Don't know which one's which.
Yeah.
Now, later, maybe down the line, months later, years later, you find out more about people, but you really don't know while you're there.
I was concerned I was going to have to talk, so I was prepping. I was, okay, what am I going to say when it's my turn to talk?
I know, but you like talking, though.
Well, thank you. Thank you. The Lord's blessed me with that, all right?
Blessed.
But here's the cool part. I never had to talk at all.
Yeah.
Like, if I got that out of the way in the beginning, knowing I wasn't going to have to say or really do anything I didn't want to do, I would have been more relaxed. But that's really one of the things that's interesting. You don't have to sit there and prep, right? There's no clergy there for the most part. There's no priests.
No.
It's just a bunch of regular guys like
us,
right?
just like us.
And we're just doing what? We're talking about
Emmaus, right? Talking about life stories. I mean, sharing our stories.
Okay. And why why Emmaus? I mean, real short to cut to, why are we called the Emmaus retreat? It's because Christ could have done anything. The risen Christ could have done anything he wanted to do, right? He could have gone on a mountaintop and said, "Hey, I just rose from the dead." He could have gone back to the temple and put the drape back together. He could have brought Caesar to his. He could have done anything. I mean, he was the risen Christ. He rose from the dead, the first guy in history to rise from that. So what does he go do, Mike? What does he go do? He could have done anything. What did he go do?
He finds two people running away from where he just got crucified.
Yeah.
And does he identify himself to these guys?
Yeah, he just kind of buddies up to them, kind of asks what's going on, and he met them where they were at.
Met them where they were at.
They were in a point of despair. They were a point of kind of fleeing, scared.
They were probably scared.
They're probably afraid for their lives.
Yeah.
But he met them where they were at. He didn't make people go to him. And then he starts teaching them.
I mean, they were searching.
them.
They were searching for the disciples, and Christ was, he was like destroyed. I mean, physically destroyed, right? I think a lot of guys were like scrambling, just like us today, right? We're all kind of like scrambling, right? So then, when did he, Angelo? When did he reveal himself, and kind of what were the tools that Christ used to get these guys to understand and to calm down?
Yeah, so he's walking along with them. They don't know who he is. And he starts to break open the Bible to them. Can you imagine you're walking along with Jesus and he's breaking open the Bible to you and explaining it all to you in ways that you can understand it? So you're afraid, running away, thinking like, hey, there's no king anymore. There's nobody for me to follow.
No savior.
I'm running away.
We're on our own.
And he's walking along with them, and they feel this calm that they've probably never felt before in their lives as he explains it all to them in a manner that only he can do. And he gets to the end of the road, and they don't want him to leave.
And they think he's moving.
He makes them think, hey, I'm out of here. I'm going on. I'm moving on. And they say, no, please stay with us. Stay with us. They're like begging him. And he goes, all right, I'll stay with you. And he comes inside. And they finally realize who it is.
When do they realize? What's the aha moment? When do they realize? What does he do? What do they do that make them realize and their eyes open up immediately? What was it?
Well, they're having a meal, and he's breaking the bread.
It was the breaking of the bread.
It was the breaking of the bread.
Breaking the bread.
Oh, I've seen this before.
Yeah, so
I know who you are.
So on the way out, he's kind of talking about. He didn't have the Gutenberg Bible with him. He was talking, right? He was recounting stories, right? And then they were recounting, and then they break the bread, and boom, just like the way it happens, their eyes were opened up, right? And then, what did they do as soon as that happened? What happened to Christ? Where'd he go? What did he do?
He disappeared.
Right?
He disappeared.
Or he stayed.
Yeah.
He's just in the bread. He's just in the Eucharist now.
Okay.
Right?
And then what did they do?
They were so on fire that they wanted to run back and tell everybody what he did. He ignited them.
That very minute, right?
Middle of the night.
They ran back.
They turned around and ran back, right?
Ran back to the place that they were afraid of before, right?
Yeah.
They didn't say, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah. No.
Or I'll do it later.
Yeah, they were on fire. And they went back and they repeated what they had learned on the road and in the breaking the bread, right? And that's what Emmaus is about. And that's what happens to us and almost every guy that's been through Emmaus and every woman that's been through Emmaus since they started it in 1978, the late 70s, down in St. Louis Parish in Miami, Florida. That's where the Emmaus retreat concept first started, right? There was a small parish down there, and they were losing members, and the women of the parish, as I understand the story, and pardon me if I get a little bit wrong, but they worked with the priest there, and they came up with this concept that we think was Holy Spirit inspired. And then the guys picked it up about 4 or 5 years later in the 80s, and then they went all around the country and the world, came up to Pittsburgh in 2006.
2006 came up to St. Thomas More.
Yeah, same guys came up from some of the guys from down there,
from
and then
St. Louis.
a little bit on. They started the thing up at St. Thomas More. What happened there then?
Yeah, so it starts at St. Thomas More, and basically a brother or one of the parishioners says, "Hey, I'm on fire down here. Our parish is on fire. We're just the lay people. We're just normal people coming in, and we're having these retreats, and you need to do it." And he brings it up here, and they bring a group of guys up from Miami, from St. Louis, and they help to start it at St. Thomas More. And actually, a few guys went down to Miami first and did a retreat down there. I think 4 or 5 guys actually flew down to Miami to bring it back here.
Teach
and then the team came back up, and they got their first retreat in 2006. And then since then, it's just grown. And then people from different parishes. So I was from St. Benedict's Parish. I didn't even belong to St. Thomas More, but I went to that retreat.
So St. Benedict's in Pittsburgh has the kind of their own Emmaus, but it's basically essentially exactly the same. And Mike, and where you and I are is at St. Paul's of the Cross.
St. Paul of the Cross.
Okay. And we all share and go through each other's and, a lot of that kind of stuff. But that's kind of the quick background on things, right?
Right.
But the fire that we're talking about, right? Well, they went down to Bogota, Colombia, the same kind of guys.
Yep. 2006.
We've had about 2,500 men and women go through. There's a men's retreat, there's a women's retreat, and they're separate, okay? In Bogota, get this, over 220,000 people, 220,000 have gone to an Emmaus retreat since 2006. Almost 10 times would have gone through in Pittsburgh. I mean, no, 100 times what they've gone through in Pittsburgh. And an Emmaus retreat is now all over the world, and it's on fire all over the world. So we're here just to talk a little bit about it, but I think the big thing we're here to talk about today is, this fire we're talking about. Why? Why Sunday afternoon? What happens to us individually? Where's the affirmation? What changes that is different from just, let's say, and I'm not say just going to Mass or just going to church or just, what happens to people? Talk about what happened to you. You went to Reboot. Tell a little story about what happened to you.
Yeah, so I went there again because I thought I needed to be a better father, a better husband, and I needed something. But I really didn't think, again, I thought I was there for the most part.
So you didn't want to go to the retreat?
I didn't want to go to the retreat. I put $25 down and said, "Hey, I'll pay the rest when I get there," thinking I'm never going. Keep the 25. I'm out of here.
Did you pay up or you still owe?
I think I might still owe, but don't tell the guys at St. Thomas More
make a note.
Let's fix it.
Make a note. I still think I owe them some money.
With interest.
Yeah, right. And that was, 13 years ago. It was 2007. But yeah, I thought I was already there. Didn't want to go. Told my wife, "Don't be scared. I'll probably come back sometime Friday night. I'm not going to stay." And I get there and I start hearing guys just like me telling stories, talking about their lives. And didn't relate right off the bat, was still a little skeptical. But I think God kept me there. The Holy Spirit kept me there, and I stayed the night. And then when Saturday came, ego and pride, I don't need to be here. I don't have these problems. I don't have these issues.
Some of these guys have real problems.
They got real problems.
And you're thinking
it's not me.
Yeah. You're above all that.
Yeah.
You don't have problems.
Yeah, this isn't me. I didn't have those issues, right? But as the day went on, I started to hear things that I related to that were my problems. There were things that I didn't even realize about myself, and I'm sitting there going, "Wow, this is me." Yeah. And so and when we got to Saturday night, I started to realize I had a lot more problems than I thought going into this. And so, Saturday night, I have my aha moment. That, oh man.
Your own personal affirmation.
My own personal.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, for me, it was, I loved my wife. I loved my son. And I loved God, but I had this thing where money and a bigger house and a better car, that was like my first priority. I was all messed up. You know what I mean? I was out there trying to get more money and power. It was like power and money. That was so important to me. So I realized that I really loved my wife and my son, and they were the most important thing to me. And I wasn't giving them me, because I was the most important thing to them. And when I realized that, I just realized that, wow, I have to go home. And I wanted to go home right then.
Oh, nice. That's nice.
I wanted to go and see my wife. I wanted to go and see my son and tell them that I loved them. And then the next day came, Sunday. I couldn't wait to get home. And these guys kept telling me more stories. Yeah. And it kept opening me up. They were just opening my heart because I was realizing more and more the things that I needed to work on, the things that would help me to be that better man, that better husband, that better follower in God. And so I can tell you that I was a blubbering idiot when I saw my wife and my son on Sunday.
Could they tell the difference?
They could tell the difference.
Right? In 48 hours.
48 hours. Changed my life. 2007.
Come on, man. That didn't happen.
It happened.
I mean, that's what we say all the time.
It happened. Come on, man. It happened.
Mike, we hear the stories, because what the guys do is they testify about what's going on in their own life. Guys that have been there before, now they're not retreatants, but they're part of the team, right?
Right.
And they'll get up and they'll tell stories, and they're all different. But isn't it amazing how just when you think you heard everything, just when you think you went, come on, that didn't actually happen. I mean, that guy didn't go through that and come out the other side with God. That didn't happen. Then you hear the next one, and the next one's crazier than the last one, and you just want to. You kind of wish the weekend didn't end. How was your first? Where you were reaching for answers. What was the aha moment? What happened with you?
Yeah, so let me rewind a little bit. So, like Angelo, thought I was a good Christian, good Catholic. Went to church. I actually helped out on church on Sundays, and always had. Like, never really thought about it. My mom kind of instilled that in my brother and I. So, spiritual leader of the house. So I always kind of grew up around it. And sometimes when you grow up around something, you don't maybe actively choose it every day, it kind of gets a little stale. So for me, I was the stale Catholic. Still went to church, so I didn't get so stale that I kind of fell away.
Going through the motions.
So, I was probably the spiritual equivalent of a teenager trapped in a 35-year-old man's body. Really, because, I didn't really pursue studying the Bible or anything like that much after I kind of graduated school.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of stale, kind of going through the motions. And a buddy of mine at work, Andy, we know Andy, right? Asked me to go. And the first time I couldn't go, not because I didn't want to go, it was just a conflict. The second time he asked, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll go. Didn't really think much of it. To be honest, I was so busy at work, I didn't even think. It was like the morning of, I had to pack for it. I started thinking about, like, what am I actually getting myself into? So I didn't think about it enough to even try to want to bail out. And I get there Friday night, and, the first guy welcomes me and says, hey, man, you're welcome here. Glad you're here. Didn't even know me. Just made me feel really, really welcome and comfortable. Probably unlike you, I was blubbering after the first story. Okay. It didn't take me. Because I hear all these things. I'm thinking, where have I been where guys share? These are raw. Some of these stories are raw. Like the things people have been through and gone through and come out on the other side through the help of their faith, through the help of other like-minded men and women. I'm thinking, could I do that? You hear all sorts of stories, and they're all different, but they're all the same. So my life, I didn't have some of the, let's say, the worldly challenges, let's say with addiction or money problems or marital problems per se. But it comes down to ego, pride, stubbornness, like all of those things kind of at the root of most of these stories. Now, the circumstances change, the details change, but really, if you really look under the story, it's all of those egocentric things that keep us kind of doing our own thing as opposed to serving other people. So I recognize that probably with the first story, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I feel so small. And I felt really inadequate in that these guys, ordinary guys, have gone through such strife, such chaos, and now they're here. They've gotten through it. Could I even do that? Yeah. So that made me feel really, really small in the moment. And that's where probably half the talks I was probably crying. Really, I really was. And
you're not a crier.
No. I think my daughter wondered if my tear ducts got fused shut when I was a kid.
You do, what do they call tough mutters?
Yeah.
You do all that kind of stuff. You're kind of into that. You don't want to be crying on a tough mutter. You don't want to be
it's not a good look.
Not a good look.
No, I've been told I'm an ugly crier, too. So it's definitely not a good look. And when I emerged Sunday, like you, I think you said you don't want it to end.
Yeah, you don't want it to end.
I didn't want it to end, but I felt like I was given such a gift that I felt compelled to give it to others. So as soon as I could, I'd say, all right, how can I help out? How can I help out? Because I realized in my own weakness, I felt good for 40. It's easy to feel good for 48 hours, especially where you're off in the retreat center. It's nice. It's peaceful. There's not all the distraction. There's no chores. No one's nagging at you. I mean, it's a great chance just to get away. And then Sunday night, you get in your car, and now what? You got to get ready for work. Yeah. You're a weekend behind on your chores. Kid needs help with homework. Like, life gets in the way really, really fast.
Yeah.
And I noticed quickly after that if I don't keep this up, I'm going to fade. Right? So part of it was I want to give this to others, and that's, like, I think, my primary motive. The other is, if I don't give this to others, my own fire, my own spirit is going to fizzle out. It will have just been a nice weekend, but it's so much more. And I found the more I gave to this brotherhood, this community, the more I've given back, or I've gotten back. And that keeps me coming back. So my first was 2011, so you guys started a little earlier than me, but I don't know, 14 or 15 retreats. And I'm not saying the number to brag, it's just because I need
you need
twice a year tune-up. That's kind of like my spiritual, like you take your car in to get maintenance. Twice a year is kind of my spiritual tune-up. I do help with these retreats. And
so it's pretty fair to say that based on what we hear from Columbia even, that about 25% of the guys that come to an Emmaus retreat or are in the Emmaus community are guys that went kind of to reboot and were either Christian or were Catholic or whatever they were, and they were there just to kind of deepen their faith and be with like-minded men. That's about 25%, right? And about 50% of the guys are guys that are, they have faith, they don't have faith, but they're reaching for answers to try to see if God really exists. Does God even really exist? I mean, a lot of guys sit in church or in a pew for most of their life, and like you maybe, really asking the question, well, does God, is he really helping me out? Does he really exist? Is he really up there? So that's about 50% of the guys, right? And then there's about 25% of the guys that are just overwhelmed with stuff in their life, that they're just looking for a solution to get through the next day or the next week. But the amazing part is that all three guys go to the same retreat, bond together, and all three get answers to the things that they were reaching out for.
They get what they need.
Yeah, can you work on that a little bit for me and talk about how that you've seen that happen? Because that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you think there would be a separate retreat for these guys, separate retreat for these guys, and a separate, completely different for these guys.
Sometimes these are all the same guy.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right?
Good point.
Different phases in your life. There's times I've been overwhelmed. There's times I've been, I'd say, stale.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of the reboot. Yeah. And there's times I've been like, is this all there is? Right? Yeah. Am I doing what I'm called to do? Like I felt early on, this is weird. Like when I don't know if I've even shared this before, but I don't know, it was high school. I kind of got this feeling, like it's I don't know. I like to think when God talks to you, it's not a big clamor. It's kind of like a soft little thing. And there's times I hear things. I'm like, is that me? Am I making that up? But I just felt called, like I was called to something special. Sometime in high school, I felt that, and I would feel it a couple times. And then, actually, it's probably around before I started going to the retreat. I'm thinking, I'm not feeling that anymore. Like, did something happen? Right?
Okay.
So I was like, well, maybe I heard it wrong. Maybe I wanted to hear it and it didn't hear it, or I think now, 14 or 15 retreats in, I think I am, but I think that calling kind of got muffled in the day-to-day, the husband, father, trying to build a career and a new life in Pittsburgh and things like that. So this really kind of rekindled that kind of feeling of calling and
there you go.
Helping others. So,
yeah, for me, it amazes me that a guy can get up there and tell his story and be saying things that he's not even aware of what he's saying. But it's exactly what I needed to hear, or it's exactly what somebody else needed to hear. And they'll tell a different part of the story, and it touches someone else's heart. And whether they were overwhelmed or they were just searching to deepen their faith, wherever they were, if they were lukewarm sitting in the pew, that same story seems to change everybody in that room the way they need to be changed. And obviously it's the Holy Spirit. God knows guys are saying the words that need to be said. I think we've all prepared for talks that, after you're a candidate, you may be asked to give a talk, right? As part of the Emmaus. And I've prepared and then been up there and said something totally different. And it was exactly, and people come up after saying, "Wow, I totally related to your story."
And you didn't even realize you didn't even realize it was totally different.
No,
you thought you were giving the.
I thought I was giving the same talk. And I think you've heard some of them, and you looked at me one day and you said, "That was not the talk that you practiced
that morning,
an hour ago."
Yeah, morning,
an hour ago. Yeah. So, and I didn't plan it, and I think we all know that. It's just it happens. It's what you need. It's what we all need. And like you said, Mike, when you come in, you might not think you need it, but you need to get back, and you need to get back with like-minded people. It just helps you to get out into the anxieties of daily life and get through it.
Where else would you have or could you have told some of your stories like that?
There's no other place that I would have felt comfortable to stand up in front of men.
Your family?
And tell those stories.
Yeah.
My deepest, most personal stories. And again, this isn't for the candidates. You know what I mean? This is the retreatants. Right. You guys don't have to say anything. All you have to do is sit there and listen. But at different points, we've gotten up and we've told our stories, and there's no other place that I could have got in front of all these men and shared my story and had it be meaningful to them and meaningful to me, because you get to look at yourself and and see.
Did you ever feel judged or fear of being judged telling it?
Never felt judged. Never felt the fear of being judged.
I was concerned that when I went that there'd be all these holy guys, all these guys that have been studying the Bible and all this, and I would go there as an atheist, right? And what was I even doing there? And these guys would be judging the fact that I had no belief whatsoever, right? And you don't find those guys. Even the guys that were born in the faith, be they Protestant, be they Catholic, be whatever they are. There's just none of that. It just doesn't exist, which is incredible to me. I spent the first 2 hours being concerned about who I was sitting with and what I was going to say.
So, Bob, who invited you? I don't even know if I heard this story. Who invited you to Emmaus? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Talk about overwhelmed. All right, talk about overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed with life from another perspective. I was overwhelmed because my life was so good, or so I thought. I had beautiful wife, beautiful children, wonderful house, great job, great career, power, a little bit of reputation.
Nice hair.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, exceptional hair.
So, I thought, not arrogantly, it wasn't arrogance, but I just thought I didn't need it because I didn't even deserve it, right? I mean, God had, if he was up there, he had better people to work on than me, because if he was up there, he dealt me a pretty good hand of cards. So I don't need it. So I even remember, Mike, when I went, one of my friends tricked me into going, right? Chris tricked me. He said a friend of his dropped out at the last minute, and would I go and sit at the table until the guy showed up?
No.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, Chris. You know Chris.
Yeah, I do know Chris.
Yeah. So I'm sitting at the table, and and I called my wife on the phone, and I said, look, honey, you circle the parking lot, take the kids out to eat, and then about 10 o'clock, you come back up, because I'm going to be out of here. I am gone.
Escape plan.
I am gone. So I got up and told that story. They said, Bob, why are you here? And I got up and I actually told them that. I just felt like you two did. I felt this calm come over me. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I just tell them the truth? Why don't I just tell them the truth? And I told what I just told you, and about 100 guys that were there applauded. And I went, what?
Yeah. That's nice.
Nora, what? I mean, I was right in the face of you guys, right? So I called my wife back and I said, maybe I'm going to, because I felt so comfortable. I felt this sense of peace come over me, Mike, so that, that I stayed. And then something happened. That's one of the things that this show's about. And the future shows, this is just a warm-up. What we're really going to do here is we're going to talk about affirmation. We're going to talk about things that happen to you or me or the guests we're going to bring in, the guys that we know, the women that we know, that something happened to them that only could happen if there was indeed a God and the God was in their life. It's one thing to hear that you're cured from cancer. Wonderful story, great. It's a wonderful thing to hear that hey, Mike needed a loaf of bread and he prayed for it one night, and the next morning he was driving to work and a loaf of bread fell off a truck, and But you know what? If that happened in your life, that gives you affirmation that there is a God. Because it couldn't have happened. It's impossible for that to happen. So that's good for you. And if you got cured of cancer, well, that's good for you. But if I'm out there watching this, or I'm going to go into the retreat, that's nice, But when I need the loaf of bread or I need cured from cancer, if I don't have my own personal affirmation, if I don't get that aha moment, then the faith's not really real to me, and that's where I was. The more I studied the faith when I was a kid, the more I thought, well, I can explain this and I can explain that, and you know what, Jesus Christ died for our sins. I mean, come on, man. I mean, he was God, so if he died for our sins, it wasn't a big deal because he knew the next day he'd be in heaven, and he'd be in. So what was the big deal? Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, I just heard it.
Yeah. That's where I was. I was kind of like, so there isn't a God, and because that's all got to be fake, because he wouldn't even do that. That's how gone I was. And life was so good. I was so overwhelmed with it. I was headed straight to hell and didn't even know it and didn't believe that hell even existed. That's how messed up I was until I got hit right across the face with a 2x4 by the Holy Spirit. And he gave me an affirmation that could only have happened if indeed there was a God. And that's the stories, Mike, that we hear, right?
Is it the Father Joe story?
Well,
do you tell that, or are you saving that for another?
Well, you got to tell the Father Joe story. Come on.
Well,
it's your A material.
All right.
Or at least B material.
Yeah. I'll use it only so that we can talk about some of the things why we get on fire about all this, right? So I was, I had been to a couple of retreats and I was pretty much on fire and I was starting to believe. But I went back to the Catholic faith only because I was born Catholic. My mother was Episcopalian, right? But so I thought, well, if I'm gonna get on board with this God thing, right? I'm gonna go back to my Catholic faith because at least that's where it started. It wasn't like if I was Episcopalian, I would have been Episcopalian. I would have said, okay, I'm Episcopalian. I'm going to go, and I'd still be in Emmaus, right? So, but like one of the things that I never got was confession. I mean, confession to me was like, are you kidding me? I'm going to go into a box with a guy, and I'm going to talk to him, and I'm going to tell him my sins, and then he's going to forgive me, and then I'm going to be forgiven. Okay. So I was having trouble with that even after my first, 5 or 6 personal affirmations. Okay. Am I putting you guys to sleep with this, or am I okay still? Am I okay?
Speed it up a little.
Speed up. Okay. Okay, so I got to go to confession. I don't want to go to confession. And Father Joe is my spiritual director, whatever that means. All right. So I would go to Father Joe, and I would talk about these things that would happen to me that were personal affirmations, and I would say, am I imagining that? And he would say, was anybody else involved? And I would say, well, yeah. And then he would determine, hey, Bob, that's real. Why don't you just believe it? And then I'd talk to my wife, and I'd say, you know what happened to me today? And she would say, Bob, why don't you just believe it, because that just doesn't happen. Father Joe would say, he would do that. So anyway, it was embarrassing to go to confession because I had the same sins all the time, right? And I didn't want to confess the same sins all the time to Father Joe because then you feel like a big loser, right? Because that's how bad I didn't understand confession. Right. But I'm like a lot of guys that way, right?
Yeah.
So I was ignoring it. It was Easter. I had to go to confession. I'm in Emmaus. I can't go to church, be in a religious group, and not go to communion. So I'm up against it. I don't want to go to confession. So I do everything I can to get out of the way from Father Joe. So there's only a week left. It's time to go to confession. I only got 5 days, 7 days to go. I got to go. So I go to St. Elizabeth Church in Pittsburgh because it's not my parish. I'm thinking maybe at the end of the Mass, the priest who I don't know says, hey, everybody, I'm bringing some priests in from out of town. and they're going to be here for confession on Tuesday. It's your last chance. And he said, and I am not, this priest who I didn't know, he said, I'm not going to be there so all you people can come because I know a lot of you don't like to go because I'm in the box, right? And you don't want to, So I thought to myself in the back of the church, wait a second. God's talking directly to me because I came to that parish that day to get away, and this guy's saying, I'm going to have some strangers there. And so I thought, wow, this is cool. So Tuesday comes around, to make the story shorter. I go to get to confession. I get the first guy in the church because I want to get in, I want to get out, right? First thing I do, though, is I check the names on the doors at the back of confession.
Yeah.
Just to be sure, right? Because I have had some other affirmations that were significant. I walk across the back of the church. I see the names on the doors. I don't know anybody. Whew. I'm safe. I sit down. I go to prepare for confession. I'm sitting there. Nobody's in the church. And a bunch of women come into the back of the church. They're picking their kids up from school across the street, the Catholic school. And they're chirping. And it sounded to me like crows were in my head, like scratching. It was like I'm trying to prepare. I'm trying to buy off of this whole confession thing, right? And I'm hearing these women going, and I gave them some. I'm giving them dirty looks, and they're not paying any attention to me, right? But it was like crows. So I was like kind of angry, and I thought I can't go to confession angry. So people are starting to walk in now. I get up out of my chair. I walk across in front of these women who pay no attention to me. They don't stop chirping. I walk all the way down to the front of the church to get away from these women, okay? So I'm down the front of the church. I'm waiting to go into confession. I'm the first guy in line there, okay? And I'm standing there, and I get a tap on the shoulder, right? So it's this woman taps me on the shoulder. Well, I never talk to anybody in confession. No one ever talks to me ever. So this woman taps me on the shoulder, and she says, do you know the priest? I said, no. In fact, I came here specifically because I didn't want to know the priest. I want to go to confession to my own priest. I said, why? I said, are you scared? I don't know what made me say that to her. She said, yeah, I'm scared. And I said, well, I'm scared. I said, you shouldn't be scared. We shouldn't be scared. But I get most everybody in this room scared. Okay, she kind of went like this, and she leaned her head on my shoulder. She was like a woman maybe in her late 50s, early 60s. She leaned her head on my shoulder. She said, kind of like a sense of relief. So I said to her, I said, why are you, what's the problem? She said, well, my best friend who I grew up with, she loved confession, she loved the church, and we loved each other, and she just recently passed away. She died. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that we ever disagreed on was confession. She always went to confession. I never went. It was a bone of contention. And when she died on her deathbed, I promised her I would go to confession for her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I went, oh, wow, So I thought to myself, so I said, is this your first time to confession? She says, this is my first time in 50 years to go to confession. And I thought, oh, my. I said, so are you kind of embarrassed, beside being embarrassed? She said, yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed. And I said, well, so am I. So am I. So are these guys, right? And she said, well, I don't know anybody. I don't know the priest. And I said, neither do I. At that moment, okay, Father Joe, who I was avoiding, walks into the far entrance to the church, looks straight across at me and goes,
busted.
And I went, what? What? Impossible. And he gives me like the where am I, right? He walks around the church where I was sitting with the crows, with the confessionals where there's other priests. He walks down, he whacks me on the shoulder. People in confession line laugh. He walks, I look, his name is on the confessional in the front of the church where I moved to.
Wow.
He wasn't even supposed to be anywhere within 100 miles of there. Okay, so I walk in, guys. I am on fire. How could that possibly ever happen unless there's a God? So I start telling him the story. I tell him this story right that I'm telling you. Well, he starts rocking back and forth in his chair like this. And he's listening to me. And he says, the hound of heaven. And I go, what? He said, Bob, do you know what the hound of heaven is? I said, I have no idea what the hound of heaven is, right? He said, well, the hound of heaven is something that we believe is reserved for people that are agnostics, atheists, that need affirmation, that need something to happen to them that is completely impossible, only to them that they know. It's not somebody else's cancer or somebody else's loaf of bread. It's, you've been avoiding me completely, and I show up, and there's no explanation for it, right? And I go, whoa. So then he says, but you know the reason that you're really here? I said, the reason I'm really here, I'm here to get a confession. He said, no, the reason you're really here was for that woman out in the line.
Oh, wow.
And he said, Bob, he said, you're being an agnostic and an atheist. He said, your affirmation, you have to go the rest of your life. It's your gift. And you have to tell those stories to other people so that they can have their own affirmation. And you can talk about the circumstances in your life that caused that to happen, right? So that's what this program is about. And that's what we're here today to launch. We're going to be bringing people in that have had similar type affirmations. And then we're going to say, well, what happened in your life at the time, so that people that are watching, right, and people that we don't even know can have their own type of God-incidental story. I didn't mean to put you to sleep with that, but you know what I mean.
I love that story.
So those kind of things are.
I felt like I was in church with you.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's the only time I feel like saying amen. You know what I mean? I felt like saying amen. But the first, I went outside of church that day. I remember this. I'll remember this to the day. I walked out of church, and I was like I was floating. And I walked out, and I said to myself, I said, God, take me right now. And why did I say that? I couldn't have believed, atheist, 3 years before, I couldn't have believed any more that God, I knew at that moment that there absolutely was a God. He was in my life, and that he's in everyone's life. All we have to do is open our heart, open our mind, read the scripture, hang out with a bunch of guys or women that are like-minded, go to church, go whatever it is, and those affirmations start to come because you're open to them, right? Right. So that's where we are. Now, talk more about any of those other affirmations that you've had, some personal affirmations in that direction, so we can get me off the mic here.
No, I love that story. I know, right? That was a great story. I can't even top that story.
It's not a matter of topping. The loaf of bread. We had one guy at one of his testimonies was talking about, he was at the point where he was the opposite of where I was. He was so broke, things that happened so badly in his life that he literally prayed for a loaf of bread. He kind of was rebooting. He believed in God at the time, but he said, I need a loaf of bread to come from somewhere because we need to eat. He was down to the basics of, he was praying for a loaf of bread, and literally the next day, he was going to work, and a loaf of bread fell off of a truck. He went over, it was perfectly wrapped, he picked it up and took it home. Now, you may say, come on, man, that didn't happen. Yeah. Well, it did happen, right? And then that's what we hear, story after story after story after story. And then we start to have our own affirmations, right?
Absolutely.
I had a loaf of bread story.
Go.
Except it was a box of cookies.
What happened?
Actually, we were talking about this before.
Right.
So, as you guys know, and the other watchers will know, viewers will know, is, have a daughter now, so only child, beautiful, beautiful, healthy, love her to death. She really wanted to have a brother or sister. Really, really wanted. She kept coming to her like, Mommy, Dad, I want to have a brother and sister. And wife and I were old enough, and she was healthy. It's like, oh man, going to diapers again. Like, it just wasn't we just didn't feel called to have a brother or sister for her. And then we start hearing like advertisements on the radio for, you consider adoption or foster, like all these things started to come. Okay. Right. Not like, so her little voice kind of planted the seed, and the seed kind of grew and grew and grew and grew. And, we went through it was a really tough time. So we got pretty far through the adoption process, and very suddenly it was ripped away from us. right? Like, one day this child is at our house. We're making plans for his room and, vacations together and all this other stuff. And then the next day, knock on the door, we're bringing you back to your family. Obviously, there's more to the story than that, but essentially it felt like a sudden ripping away of this family that we thought we had. And it really was, grief was probably not even the right word for our family at the time. I stayed home from work the next day. My wife stayed home. I mean, we were crying and we were just in sweatpants, like just completely bummed out, depressed. And, I don't know, we didn't feel like cooking. We make a lunch or something, and we're sitting, and it's like, you know what? I think my daughter's like, or maybe my wife's like, it sure would nice to have some cookies or something like a little bit of dessert. And
just to change the mood.
Just to change it, like something nice. My daughter likes sugar.
Don't we all?
Yeah, we do. Some more than others, apparently.
Yeah, right.
And I swear, probably 5 minutes later, there's a ring on our doorbell. And I don't know, it's one of those cookie delivery services. Like people from my work, I'm really blessed with really good coworkers, sent a box of cookies because I thought we needed cheering up. So really, it was kind of... Yeah, I know, wow. I swear, it's not a loaf of bread, but it was a box of cookies.
Come on, man.
Crazy.
I swear. And it was, again, it's a small thing, right? Was it curing my cancer? No. Was it I was broke and now I found money and I can... No. Did it change my life in a major, major way? No. Was it a little affirmation of, I'm hearing you, I'm with you?
And it couldn't have happened any other way if I wasn't there.
If this box of cookies can cheer you up, give you a little bit of joy in this intense period of grief, enough to keep you on the journey, then that's what I'm going to give you.
Wow.
A little bit later, actually, later the same day, we got the box of cookies. Maybe we're getting a little greedy. Say, don't really feel like cooking. It'd be nice if I don't feel like going out to eat. And like we're all, we were kind of crying and sweatpants. Like again, we didn't really even feel like going out and showing our face. It'd be nice to have dinner. I swear. Another ring on the doorbell. Our neighbors.
Oh, come on.
Wow.
And we weren't like a super tight-knit neighborhood. I mean, friendly, but not like, come on over. Like, it's not like people brought us dinner before. 3 or 4 women, moms, in the neighborhood brought Italian food and wine and all this other stuff. So meals for like 2 days, same day. And it was just like, all right. So in this case, God fed through my coworkers and the neighbors, fed us physically. But years later, that story is still feeding me spiritually. Again, didn't change my life, didn't change the world, and it was just what I needed when I needed it, in the form that I needed it. That was like, okay, we can do this.
The cool part is it was God in your life. It wasn't just a story about you and your family. You had been praying, you had been working on this whole thing for this adoption. God knew what you needed at the time, and then provided just that lift. Yeah. And you knew it couldn't have happened any other way. That's the cool part.
And I'm convinced these things happen to us all the time. Just we're not looking.
Yeah, we're not open.
We're not listening. We're not open, right? So once you start looking for them, Bob, how many have happened to you since that Father Joe story?
Yeah, we've had.
Was that the last one for you?
30. It's been about 30.
Okay.
To that level where there are other people involved, not just I've had maybe more. If it was in my head, I had a dream and then something occurred. But where there were multiple people involved, and Father Joe tells me that that's really a blessing because it doesn't. Sometimes even a priest will go through their whole life and not have one.
Right.
And to be blessed with over 30 of those is I'm not bragging about it. But you know what it shows me? It shows me how far off I was that God has to send me so many of those to keep me on the path.
But is he sending them to all of us and we just don't see them?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what happens to many of us a lot of times, that we just don't see the God-incidences. You say, it's just coincidence. That's not God. It's just a coincidence that happened.
Right.
And the more other people are involved, that's when it really gets interesting, because there's, like, you had 2 other people involved in that situation. I had a woman that came out of nowhere and a priest that so how do you imagine that? That's not imagined. It can't be imagined. These people are in the same affirmation at the very same time. It's like
And the other cool thing for me is being on the flip side of that story. Right, so the story I told, right, we're on the receiving end of, in this case, food and dinner. There's been times, whether, either going to one of these retreats or somewhere else, where someone comes and thanks me for something apparently I did that touched them, and I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
I had this one guy, Jimmy.
Okay.
Apparently, he was giving a talk at one of our retreats, and he was real nervous for it. And I talked him out in the parking lot. I probably talked for 5. I said, "Jimmy, you got this. You've been ready for this the whole time." Again, I was probably unloading my car, so I probably wasn't really even thinking about what I was saying at the time. He comes to me to this day 3 or 4 times, says, "You know what? I still remember that conversation. You took the time to say to calm me down when I needed it most." I barely even remember it. Yeah. So being the other side of the story, and knowing that every day I could be the other side of someone's story, God working through me.
Being the tool.
Being a tool, not the tool. Being a tool. I've been called a tool before, but this is no, but yeah, being part of the plan and not knowing about it is also, it's not why I do it. The feeling's not why I do it, but when I do it and I hear about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do more of this.
Mike, how much time do we have? Where are we? 2
minutes. We got to wrap up.
Wow.
We got to wrap this up.
So let me take a shot at wrapping it up, and then you guys, finish it off.
Sure.
The next podcast and the podcast after that and the podcast after that, we're not going to be warming up like we did today. We're going to be going into those stories, those affirmations, for the purpose of not someone just hearing about the affirmation, but seeing how other people's affirmations occur. What were they doing in their life? What was I doing in my life where I opened up so I could get the affirmation that now no matter what happens, no matter what happens to the world, no matter what happens in the church, no matter what happens anywhere, guess what? Father Joe and that affirmation, you can come in and you cannot take my faith away from me. It's impossible because it couldn't have happened any other way. That's what the purpose of this podcast is. Can you add to that?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, that they can't take your faith away once you have these affirmations. Once you see God in your life and you realize this isn't a coincidence. This is a God-incidence.
There we go.
And this is going to change my life forever. I can never lose my faith once I have that affirmation. And when you have 30 of them, you can never lose your faith. Yeah, and it happens to all of us. Sometimes we just don't see it. But when you do see it, it's going to change your life forever.
Mike?
Kind of what I'm thinking about now is the story of Emmaus. So if you're not familiar with the story, right, I won't get too Bible-y on you, but it's Luke chapter 24, and great story. It's a story of motion, right? We all have our own Emmaus, right? For the disciples, it actually was a town 7 miles away from Jerusalem. So they had a literal Emmaus. Your Emmaus might be your success. You're running towards something. Mm-hmm. Yours might be your family, your job, your car. Other people might be drugs or alcohol or infidelity. Like, we're all running, whether we know it or not, we're in motion. We're either running towards something or running away from something.
Nice.
So we all have our Emmaus, whether we want to admit it or not. So my Emmaus is different than yours and yours. Coming to the actual retreat, you'll see clearly where your Emmaus is.
Or tuning into the show. Or
tuning into the show.
Yeah.
Just like you didn't quite realize where yours was until
you get there.
Until you get there. And then, right, you have this aha moment, you have this, and then you turn back and you run back to where you should have been going from before. So to me, it's really a story of motion, and where they're running towards something, running away from something. So let's pick what we're running towards.
There we go. So to put a wrap on this, we are fishers of men. That's what the Emmaus community is, right? Our mission is to go out and spread the good news.
Jesus Christ is risen.
And what is the good news?
Yeah, Jesus Christ is risen.
He has risen indeed.